it back.
Andrew Little, 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It's a pleasure to have the opportunity to talk about student loans once again. It's the first time in about 20 years, I might add, and I had a lot to say then. Usually at the end of a megaphone in the front of this great building or on the streets of Wellington at the time. But, Mr. Speaker, the point is this. This bill is about enacting the same powers for our Inland Revenue Department as the Russian tax department has on their tax defaulters. And we know how they treat their tax defaulters. They turn up, their IRD equivalents turn up fully in full camouflage gear, fully blacked out, armed with AK-47s and Tommy knockers and all the rest of it, and they go smashing doors down, smashing people up for when they don't pay their taxes. This is a bill that is completely over the top when it comes to enforcing the obligations of student loan defaulters. The student loan scheme was introduced, has been in place in various forms to enable people to get access to education. It was unfortunate that over the last 20 or 30 years the state of the economy, or for whatever reason, has been such that the state cannot afford access to education to those who need it and who are capable of taking it up. And so we have moved to more of a user pay system, and so the student loan scheme has come in to facilitate that. But what we need to make sure is that we don't introduce a mechanism and a scheme that becomes so punitive and that becomes so ugly in its implementation that it puts people off. And there are a number of reasons, as previous speakers in this House have alluded to, there are a number of reasons why those who have taken out student loans once they've completed their studies and gone out in the great wide world, which is something that we encourage young New Zealanders to do, why they can find it difficult to commence or recommence their student loan repayments. And so, Mr. Speaker, the last thing we need is to have in place a scheme that intimidates, that bullies, that conjures up fear for New Zealanders when they are overseas, and to persuade them or encourage them not to return. You know what we most want in this country? We want educated young people. And whether it's educated in our tertiary institutions or in the trades or in any other form of training, but those who undertake a form of tertiary education by which they are required to take out a loan in order to get access to it, we don't want to create a disincentive for them to use those skills and deploy themselves in a way that is for the benefit of New Zealand. And that's what this bill will do. That's why we are so fiercely opposed to it, because it just is not good for the long-term interests of young New Zealanders who take up the opportunity of tertiary education, nor for New Zealand itself when it comes to harnessing the skills and the learning and the talents that they have developed. That's why this is so wrong. And the National Party members opposite, all they have left to fall back on is the tired old rhetoric of irresponsible young people. And here's the irresponsible young Mr. O'Connor, the youngest old fogey of them all, who sits there bleating out the tired old rhetoric of the tired old fogies of the National Party, saying we don't want irresponsible young youth. Well, it's not about that. It's actually about our brightest and best, who, because of everything else the National Government have done, race off overseas because that's the best they can do for themselves. And we want to make sure that the conditions are right for them to come back, because they know that when the next Labour-led government comes in a few months' time, they'll be flooding back then, because that's when they will see opportunity. And we don't want a law on the books that tells them that when it's time for them to come back, if they haven't been able to repay their loans for reasons beyond their own control, that they're going to be harassed and harangued at the border, clapped in the handcuffs, frog-marched off to the nearest prison before they can enjoy their freedom. We don't want that. That's not what a responsible education system does. That's not what a responsible inland revenue system does. And that's not what a responsible piece of legislation does when it comes to enforcing student loans. This bill is the opposite of that. It is irresponsible, it is nasty, it is petty. Everything that the National Party is characterised by and stands for nastiness and pettiness is reflected in this bill, and that's why we are opposed to it. We are in favour of education. We are in favour of responsible students. We are in favour of responsible lending, and that's why we will oppose this bill.
David Cleandon.
And this has been quite a big week.